Thank you, Hina. By now, United States have airlifted, evacuated, whatever term would you like to use, 120,000 people from Kabul. At the same time, it is struggling with ISIS-K while Taliban are cooperating. At this moment, the question is 120,000 are airlifted. What about the rest of the 38 million Afghans who are there? What's happening with them? There are lines outside the bank. What is going on? How is life over there? To discuss that with us is someone who is an Afghan American, who is an IT professional, but deeply involved in what goes on in Afghanistan. We have Tawab Hamidi for Virginia. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Walaikum assalam, brother Malik Mujahid, and thank you for having me.
To tell us what is happening with people in Kabul.
Well, uh, thank you for hosting me and raising awareness to the issues of Afghan and the plight. Um, so in my discussions with various people on the ground, um, they've echoed that they've got some level of peace and security now, but the bigger challenge is their finance. The banks are closed. The institutions, well, they recently opened, but with very limited access. You can only take out $200 in a 24-hour period, and that's only if you're lucky enough to be able to um, get in line early enough, and then they close the banks early on. And then they've got financial inflation, which is continuously keeps going up. You've got 25 to 30% easily inflation of basic commodities. Um, and additionally, the world, I mean, the Afghan central bank reserves of 10 billion was frozen by the US as soon as the Taliban came in. The IMF froze $450 million that were scheduled last week to be sent to Afghanistan. The World Bank has frozen financial support. All remittance is completely stopped. And then before the um, the collapse of the previous government officials and elite took out as much money as they could and took it out of the country. So the bank was basically left impoverished, and a lot of people who held their money in the bank can no longer access it or have any financial transactions. And then, in addition to this, the World Health Organization had scheduled 500 tons of much needed medicine that was due to arrive last week or in the past few weeks. But because the airport has now been prioritized to take all these other Afghans out, they can't ship those medications or medicine, and the the hospitals are running out. So I hope that gives you a glimpse of what's happening on the ground.
Well, tell me this. You mentioned that people who are leaving, they are taking the money out.
In the past 6 months or past 8 months, or I would even say as going back to 2018, the elite in Afghanistan has been taking out money from the banks, and whatever money they had, whatever investments they had, they've basically moved their money out of Afghanistan. And in addition, there are rebels prior to leaving, members of the Ghani government, people who are attached. They also took whatever money was remaining out before they left. It's as if, given that, uh, I guess, given their concern with the rapid speed that the Taliban was taking over the country, in the past few months, there was an excessive outbound remittance of money. So that further left the banks in a desperate situation.
So Taliban, who have been running a whole campaign for 20 years of guerrilla warfare, they somehow have been funding themselves. So now they have a responsibility of not only funding themselves, but funding the whole rest of the people. Afghanistan being 75 to 80% dependent on the foreign aid, what are the prospects if IMF is blocking, United States has blocked the money, if the World Bank has blocked the money? Are there some other avenues available for them to run the government? Because 38 million people need some sort of money moving. I mean, of course, Afghans are an old-time trader. They were the chiefs of the Silk Road. So trade probably will be one of the things, but the type of international dependence on they have, how they will be able to restore confidence in the world, so their money is open up back to them.
There are lots of sources, but in order to be able to leverage those sources, you still need to be able to conduct financial transactions internationally through the financial institutions. So recently, the Taliban announced in, I guess, in Kandahar that to all the farmers who were growing poppies that they can no longer grow poppies, that they should, cease growing poppies. And then the price of poppies increased to 400. There was an increase of poppies to about 400%. Now, the concern that many people have is that um, this is going to lead to a lot of transactions that are not necessarily um, uh, not necessarily recognized, or and a lot of like primitive basic level types of transactions. And additionally, there's at least concern among certain Afghan circles that they may end up making deals with China, which will, and China has been very open arms about the Taliban in the past year or so. They may end up making deals solely with China, um, which may end up having Afghanistan be completely in the sphere of China economically. And at that point, it may be too late for the U.S. to use financial incentives as a bargaining chip.
You're thinking all the ban on by America freezing the assets and the uh, IMF and World Bank going along is essentially a bargaining chip?
Absolutely. There are numerous news media, and even the G7 has stated, members of the G7, that they're using this as a means to ensure that the new government that they're planning to set up has members or includes certain members. I recently read an article where they want individuals like Ahmad Massoud, Amrullah Saleh, Atta Muhammad Noor, and maybe others back in this new government, which will probably be a point of contention.
So, so the agreement which Taliban and America signed in February 2020, does that include all that type of provisions?
When I read that agreement, no, no, I don't think anybody expected the Taliban to basically take over the way they did. Um, I think the plan, from what I can tell, the February 2020 deal did not include any of such measures. But what it did include is that they were supposed to engage with the Afghan government and create a new interim government, and that was based on Anthony Blinken's also proposal back in April. He actually put forth a proposal to the Afghan government of creating an interim government where Ghani would have had to give up power, but they completely refused it, and that's when basically a peaceful solution between the two warring factions died out.
Conversation quite a bit about new Taliban and the old Taliban, Taliban 2.0. What is your reading? Are they same Taliban who denied education to girls, or these are different people?
Well, uh, I mean, I don't think anybody, it's not part of human nature to stay the same. Ideologically, I think they're the same in the sense that their focus is that they want Sharia, they want uh, Islamic ideology is the same. But as far as their approach, from what we can see based on just the past few weeks, there's significant changes. One, they they declared amnesty for everybody, and while some people don't necessarily believe them, there are incidents that one can point to that makes it more believable. The case I have is Ismail Khan from Herat. He surrendered, and then he basically worked with the Taliban and trying to create peace between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, or some sort of a transition. And then he was free to leave, and he left and went to Iran. So they didn't necessarily held him captive. And then even in Kabul, from what I've been told, they're not engaging people in any harsh way, manner. The regular Afghans, I find women newscasters who are not even properly, like, according to the hijab dress code, are not 100% in hijab, but they still have not done anything, and they're continuously doing their work. And they've declared themselves that, to all the Afghans, that please continue on with your daily job. The schools were closed for a period of time, but now they're starting to reopen. They opened K through 6, and then the plan was to open the rest. I just heard yesterday that the Ministry of Education was announced something, but I'm not sure of the details. But their objective is that, one, have a mahram when you're going out, and make sure you have the proper dress attire. There are numerous YouTubers, famous YouTubers, that I still see going around in Kabul who are female, who are going around interviewing people, but their dress code has changed. So I do have hope that there is change, and they will not take a brute force approach to the people. But there is fear amongst certain groups, and that fear was also amplified in the past, um, at least 8 months or 9 months, by the government, as a means to leverage the people, or leverage the people to fight against the Taliban.
So is that the reason that ISIS Khorasan or ISIS K is in an interview told CNN lady who was going around in Kabul that ISIS are no longer, the Taliban are no longer firmly on Islam. So are they, is ISIS K defining itself the true holders of the Islamic extremism, as Taliban moving more towards the center and moderation?
Um, so, in the Afghan community, the biggest challenge that Afghans have is that when it comes to ISIS or ISIS K, these people do not have an address. Nobody knows who they are. There's not a single scholar or alim that defends them, or anybody can say that this guy is an ISIS K, or used to be a scholar and he left and joined ISIS K. It's a bit it's an enigma for many Afghans, because ISIS K was not ISIS was never in Afghanistan to begin with, and then for them to have come into Afghanistan, to have the funding, to have the weapons, that's a bit of a there's a lot of there's a lot of concern amongst Afghans, and yes, there are definitely issues between the Taliban and ISIS-K. There were a few. When the Taliban took over Kabul, they basically all the people who were in jail were released, at least especially political prisoners, with the exception of 9 ISIS fighters that were actually executed by the Taliban. So these kind of ISIS is still an enigma for many Afghans, just because they don't have. There's nobody that leads them that people know of. They don't have an address, don't have a spokesperson that people can refer to. So we're still, you know, in the dark.
So tell me this, are your relatives feeling safe in Afghanistan?
So I've spoken with multiple people. The the people who were older, who were from the older generation, what I've noticed is that they do feel safe, meaning that they already experienced the Taliban in the 90s. They have some level of understanding of who these people are, and they know how to operate within them. So there are quite a few people that I've had that discussion and they feel safe. But on the flip side, there's a lot of youth that have never known the Taliban. They don't know the political history and the background in the past 20 years. They've only known the Taliban from whatever the government has told them about the Taliban. So they're terrified. They're more fearful and scared. And these are family friends that I've spoken to. But fortunately, nothing has happened to any one of them. And they do say that for now things are decent, but they're concerned. Well, what's going to happen once the Americans leave? They're of the opinion that nothing is happening because of the U.S. troops still being in Kabul. At least that was their take. But I think on another note, going back to your earlier point, the Taliban are, from everything I've read and seen, they're desperately keen on gaining legitimacy in the international world. Their declaration of amnesty, their leniency policies, making sure that they don't go for revenge and retaliation killing. I think it's all part of that objective of gaining legitimacy or recognition internationally. So that gives me some hope that there will be peace and security, continued peace and security. And then in the prior government, what many people don't realize is that kidnapping, looting, thieves with guns were fairly rampant, and all of that, from what people are telling me, has ceased completely.
So it is relatively climeless while Taliban, you're saying, are in power. That's what your relatives are saying. But are some of your friends taking a flight to United States or trying to get into Pakistan?
I don't know of any specific, but I can definitely see that happening. The World Food Program, the executive director for World Food Program, basically said that 1/3 of Afghans are marching towards starvation. And then a former UN official basically said that the Afghan economy is going to collapse unless the international community supports it financially. There were already a few 100,000 internally displaced people because of fighting this year. If the economic situation does not improve, regardless of whether the whole country is in peace and security, people are still going to leave because, and this is also going to give rise to, unfortunately, all kinds of terrible things, such as child trafficking, uh, taking basically abuses towards the vulnerable who tends to be refugees.
Thank you so much, Brother Tawab Hamidi from Virginia, an Afghan American IT professional, but interested in what's happening in home country.
Thank you, Brother Malik Mujahid, and to your audience.
Back to you, Hina.